Hey guys, in this video you will see me unmounting and disassembling the 5-speed manual transmission H55F on my Landcruiser J73. It was built in '92 and it has the 6-cylinder engine, the 4.2 liter engine. So here I'm undoing some screws on the shaft. It's more boring stuff. I left it in purposely because maybe somebody's interested in seeing this as a reference on how it was built. Because I don't think this transmission was rebuilt before. Ah, there you see the grease spilling out of the shaft, and maybe there was too much grease in there. Okay, so this one was never rebuilt before. It has 280,000 kilometers on it. And yeah, it started rattling in the summer. I was towing trailer the whole summer, and when it started making noises, I just put it on the sidewalk and left it there till I got time to rebuild it. Now I'm taking off the front shaft for the 4-wheel drive. And by the way, this is not a how-to video. I'm not a professional mechanic, so take this with a grain of salt. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm a noob. I'm a nobody, you know. I just had the manual, the workshop manual, and I worked with that. I have never rebuilt a transmission before. Okay, this is the starter motor, and you see this ground wire. That's why I put in this footage. So there's a quite important ground wire attached there. Then I took out the old oil, and there were quite a few parts coming out there. And at that point I knew that it was a bearing that's gone bad. You have two parts. It's the manual transmission, and then attached to that is the transfer case, which provides the power for the 4-wheel drive to the front and the rear axle. And this was in the manual transmission, so this is part of a cage of a bearing, a roller bearing. Okay, just a little trick to get out the screw on the bell housing. I tried to work with this jack, that obviously didn't work because it was far too small and not the right tool to do this work. The transmission weighs around 100 kilo, I think. I wasn't able to lift it. And maybe when you want to do this job, take off the transfer case separately. It makes the job far easier. When I put it back together, I first put in the manual transmission and then the transfer case under the car. So I assembled the transfer case under the car, which made it quite easier. It was a one-man job at that point. Okay, so I had to use the forklift because it was too heavy and I didn't want to get it on my head, so it was just safer that way. This stick, you have to push this in and turn it clockwise to under it and counterclockwise to get it out and clockwise to get it in. That's the way. So this is it's just a part that you have to push in. You will see it. It doesn't come out quite easy, but it works. So this is just a shot of the whole assembly. You see the vacuum hose for the 4-wheel drive. And there's a bell housing with the bearing. I was too cheap to replace that, which was a fault, I think. We will see. Maybe in 100,000 kilometers I will put a new one in. Okay, so this shot of the whole transmission was more of a reference shot, so maybe you see something interesting there for your project. I had to put it on the floor because I didn't have a table really to support it. So I put it on the floor, I cleaned it up, you will see that later, and then started pulling it apart until it wasn't too heavy to lift it on the table. Also that way it can't fall off anywhere, so it's the safest way for a beginner to do it like that. When you don't have the right tools and table to support it. This was the coronavirus here. That's why it took me almost half a year to get the parts shipped to Luxembourg. They came right from Japan, I think. Okay, a little bit of cleaning up, some bolts of the bell housing. And there you see the broken bearing. This is more of a fast forward. It was just pulling out bolts and everything, this cover. And under the cover you saw the bearing immediately. It was just broken, unusable. I was lucky. There wasn't any further damage on the gearbox. You could imagine because of these parts flying around there that you could get in trouble. This is a sensor, I think it's for showing if the 4-wheel drive is engaged, but I'm not sure. Because there are two sensors. I would have to look it up. Which one is which one? The reverse gear sensor is on the cover of the manual transmission, so it's not that. This is the lever for the 4-wheel drive. It's just a nut and a ring. Not complicated. More of the 4-wheel drive lever assembly. There's no a ring that I forgot to put back on later, but yeah, whatever. Okay, now you are shouting at the screen. What are you doing with this? screwdriver, but whatever. It did work. Okay, this is where you attach the shaft, obviously. Some more covers. Just clean it later and put it back on when you assemble it. It's nothing special. These bearings were in quite good shape. So it was really only the one that was completely broken that was also bad. I replaced them all. I got... oh, this is interesting. It's the cover for the power takeoff. So that it was optional on this car to get a power takeoff, like you know it from a tractor, to attach some accessories to the gearbox and use the power of the engine. In that case, you would take this cover off and attach your accessory. So this is the other sensor that I don't know what is doing there, because I'm garbage. Yeah, the thread on that screw was a little bit damaged. I cleaned it up later. It worked fine. A little bit of hammering with a rubber hammer. Very important. Use a rubber hammer. Okay, inside the transfer case. Some reference shots. There are some rings there and whatever. After, when you reassemble this, you can easily do that under the car when you put it back on. So just reassemble the manual transmission, put it back on, attach it to the engine, and then you take this transfer case and reassemble it under the car. That reduces the weight and it's far easier to get it back in. Very important, of course, to put this back together in the right order. This is all shown very well in the workshop manual. I wouldn't do this without manual. It's very important to have that. Okay, some more rings there. This copper ring, whatever it is. No, it's not copper. Yeah, this groove has to be aligned with the case. And all these bearings were replaced later on. Because I had, I was starting to tell you that. I had 2 rebuild kits. This is the overview of all the parts. I had 2 rebuild kits, one for the 5-speed manual, and 1 rebuild kit for the transfer case. So basically all the bearings were in, and this shaft, it was also in the rebuild kit, so I put a new one in. And all the bearings and whatever, all you need, all the gaskets, everything. The rings, the O-rings. It was all in the rebuild kit. Little reference shot. Manual. Gearbox. There you see me taking off the 5th gear. So it was basic. The basic transmission was a 4-speed manual, and they attached the 5th gear to it later on. You see that a lot on cars of this generation. I know that from old Volvos. They did the same thing, where they had an old reliable 4-speed manual, and they didn't want to change it too much, and so they just put a 5th gear on. which always made problems on the Volvos, but this one seems to be more reliable. By the way, I used the wrong puller to pull the gears off later. Okay, remember how everything was put together. Okay, this was a mistake. Don't use that kind of puller and attach it to this pinion, to this gear. Because I broke the edges of the teeth off. It's hardened on the surface, and this hardened surface will just break like glass when you do it that way. So I had to replace 2 gears, 2 pinions, which was quite expensive. So I don't recommend doing it that way. But you will need to use a puller. You see there, I saw that I made a mistake, and I tried it without puller, and it was just impossible to get it off. So maybe talk to somebody who knows his stuff and see if you get the special puller to get this off. It will save you some, maybe $200 or $300. Some synchronization rings and stuff. This ring is actually the shifter. Okay, so that's just to show you how this case was on there. Nothing special to see. Few more reference shots. I'm jumping a little bit back and forth there. Oh, this O-ring is very important because it isn't shown in the workshop manual. At least I didn't see it, and I almost forgot to put it back on. So be careful with that. We saw this in an earlier shot already, so don't be confused. Okay, this is one of the bearings that was inside of this gear. Again, I used the wrong puller. This is a good brand puller, but it's not the right one to do the job. I again damaged the gear. Okay, for the bearings, you usually need a special tool from Toyota to get this off, because they want to make you scream and shout. Oh yeah, nice sound with the church clock bells ringing in the background. Strikes midnight. No, it's lunchtime. Okay, so because I obviously didn't have these tools, and they are pretty much unavailable for a decent price, I cut the whole thing out very carefully, and so just that I could get the bolts out and the shaft out, and later I pulled no I actually I pressed the rings of the bearing out with my hydraulic press. That worked pretty good. Of course, you want to be careful not to damage the bearing. And, which is also important, one of the 4 bearings, there are the inside ring is actually the shaft. So be careful what you do, because there are some people who told me that their shaft was worn out because the bearing is riding right on it. So the inner ring of the bearing, I hope you understand it right. The inner ring of the bearing, I think it's, I don't remember actually which one it was. One of these bearings. The inner ring of the bearing is actually the drive shaft. So the shaft is hardened, and the rollers are rolling on the drive shaft, and it's a poor design because it wears out, and you will have to eventually replace the whole shaft, which is very expensive. And this cutting thing doesn't work there. Okay, this doesn't look very right to work with this wrench and then hammering on it, but it worked very well, and I didn't damage it anything. Of course, you have to be careful, but it worked pretty good. Looks worse than it was. Okay, the needles fall out. This shaft is split in 2. It's the input shaft and the output shaft. And in between you have this needle bearing thingy, which also comes in the rebuild kit as a brand new one. Okay, so careful there. Don't damage the hardened gears. The surface of these gears it breaks like glass, as I told you before. Some synchronization rings, and at this point you can't just pull everything out, one gear after the other, and put it in order, and you will see what you're dealing there. It's not forbidden to film it, so that you know how to put it back together. I didn't do it, so that's why I didn't have the footage, and I can't show you now. There you see more parts of the bearing lying inside. The shaft I told you of, where the bearing is riding on the shaft itself, you see it on the right side. It's the one where the gears are actually cast onto the shaft. Okay, that was it for today. We will see the reassembly in a second video, which I will hopefully put up soon. So, thank you, bye.